Now, because of where things are at and how bad the job market is, a lot of parents are starting to change their tune, especially with their children, on how they view going to college. Because in a recent survey, about 67% of parents said that they would actually encourage their children to opt out of higher education, while 78% said they believe non-college options can deliver the same long-term success as a four-year degree. So more and more parents are starting to realize that the college education is no longer the ironclad guarantee that it used to be, that your kid is going to have success and do well in life financially. People are starting to see how hard students are getting hit with these student loan payments. You see all the delinquencies. I mean, 6 million people delinquent right now, cannot pay. This is a bad situation. And a lot of parents are sitting there looking at this like, yeah, I don't want my kid being in that situation. Maybe there's a better way. And the reality is, there has always been a better way or an alternative way, because depending on what you want in your life, sometimes you have to go to college, right? But we have over 40 million Americans right now that have some form of student loan debt right now. And the problem is, these people go into debt for these degrees, and a lot of times it doesn't pay off. And a lot of people are seeing this and realizing that it might make more sense to get into a blue-collar trade and have more job security and maybe even earn more money depending on what kind of degree you're getting. And the 67% of parents who would encourage their kids to skip college if another track was stable and paid well say they wouldn't mind at all if their kid got into a blue-collar trade that may be more promising to many high school graduates. So what we're seeing is more parents willing to tell their kids to skip a traditional four-year degree under the right circumstances, because the value equation is no longer there. You also have rising tuition, you have long timelines until the payoff really kicks in, and the availability of high-paying college alternative jobs are starting to look really appealing right now, when the cost of education is a fraction of college, or maybe even nothing, depending on the career path. And then, of course, everybody has to contend with AI, but guess what? A lot of the college degree jobs are more likely to be taken over by AI faster than a lot of the blue-collar jobs, because a lot of the blue-collar jobs are hands-on and require an actual person to do something. And this made me happy right here. Take a look at this. About 52% of Americans would choose a job with lower prestige but a much higher pay over a high-status role with modest earnings. That means that more than half of the people out there are coming to their senses and realizing that it doesn't matter how glamorous or glorious your job is. If it pays well and you can live a good life on that salary, who cares what everybody else thinks? And I love that. That's how I've lived my whole life. That's why I'm out here walking down the streets all the time, spewing all this info on YouTube. I didn't care if people thought I was crazy for leaving my well-established real estate career in exchange for being a full-time YouTuber. This is the happiest I've ever been in my whole life, in fact. And it was one of the best decisions I ever made, besides moving to Florida when I was 20 years old. And I think this is good advice that parents are giving their kids right now, because a bunch of young people also need to be aware that alternative paths do in fact exist, and they can end up even being more lucrative, especially when you look at not having any student loan debt by the time you start working, and you will start working much faster than somebody has to go to college for 4+ years to get a degree. And those extra years of being in the workforce add up. Those are years that you're making a good salary, that your peers are still sitting in a classroom waiting to get out there to only hope that they can find a job in this market, versus going for something that is actually in demand right now and you can start working with ASAP. But not all parents are encouraging their kids to do good. In fact, a lot of wealthy parents are giving their adult children financial support instead. And in a survey of 554 parents with an average of $750K in assets, all of whom have adult children, 76% of them say they are footing the bill for their children's biggest ticket items like down payments on a home or graduate degrees, and about 63% are covering their ongoing costs like phone bills and other living costs, and 98% are willing to let their adult children live with them after they turn 21, which is basically everybody. So rather than telling their kids to go out there and roll up their sleeves and learn how to do something and get a good job, they're sitting there paying all their bills instead and hoping that they're going to do something. But a lot of them are starting to get worried because a lot of these parents, 65%, say they believe they have enough money to live comfortably in retirement. But 36% of them now are starting to worry that they will be supporting their adult children well into the future and could ultimately hamper their plans to retire or be able to do things that they want to do. They're starting to realize that, maybe my kid's a deadbeat. Maybe I'm being too easy on them. And I've talked about this before. I'm not going to get too deep into this, but basically a lot of these parents are running the risk of being too nice and too lenient on their kids and not really setting appropriate expectations. And they can end up on the hook for their finances for a lot longer than they had planned, thinking it might be something temporary because the job market's not good or because the economy's not good. But then their kids start leaning on them for everything. And next thing you know, you have a 45-year-old living in your basement. And I realize that the cost of living is the #1 problem for everybody right now, including younger folks that wish they could get out of their parents' house, but they just can't right now. But you know who you are out there. You know if you're taking advantage of the situation and you're really making an effort to get out, or if you're just milking your parents for all they're worth, just so that way you don't have to do anything. And I think a lot of the parents know which one their kid is also, and they don't want to ever confront the lazy ones. Because the reality is it's always going to be challenging, guys. Like, it was challenging when I was growing up as well. And I moved to Miami. I was 20 years old. It was 2008, right at the beginning of a major economic downturn. Was it hard? Yeah. Did I make it work? Yeah. Did I have to live poor for a lot of years? Yeah. But, it all comes down to how bad you want it. There's always a way to make things work, even in today's environment. And this might be the worst economy that we have seen since 2008. But I'll tell you what, even though that's the case, there are still opportunities like these blue-collar jobs, like all of the advancements in AI. You could be somebody a part of that. Like all of the different business opportunities that exist today that didn't exist 20 years ago as well. There are so many different things that people can do now that just weren't even possible back in 2008. And I'm not a parent, guys, and I'm definitely not sitting here telling you how to be one either. But the more you coddle them, the harder it's going to be for them later on to really get out there and survive on their own. So just know that the more you help them, the more you're actually hurting them, at least in my opinion, as somebody who has seen this happen firsthand. So remember, the economists don't think that things are even going to get really bad until 2027 or 2028. So you need to be doing everything you can right now to make sure that you're hanging on and you're getting out of debt and you're doing everything you can do to get ahead financially, because we are going to be in for a rough rest of the decade, it looks like. And of course, I'll be here with any updates and any tips and tricks I can give you to always have a leg up. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. And if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here. And I'll see you in the next one.